What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are here with some Detroit Lions news, and today we are back with some Detroit Lions free agency news, as the Lions have announced 13 tenders to free agents for the 2022 NFL season. So today, we're going to go through the 13 players that are going to be back with the Lions next year. So let's get it started.
The city's been down, and it found a way to get up. And when you knock us down, we're going to get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up, and then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down. We're going to take another hunk out of you. Before long, we're going to be the last one standing.
Welcome everybody to my video. Glad you guys are here, and we are back with some Lions news. You love to see it, but today we're here with some more Detroit Lions free agency news to build off of yesterday, where the Detroit Lions re-signed receiver Josh Reynolds to a 2-year, $12 million deal, up to $12 million deal. Today we have some more Detroit Lions free agency news. The Detroit Lions are tendering 13 exclusive rights free agents, and today we're going to go through those 13 players. So this is not like the Josh Reynolds deal, all right? It's not an unrestricted free agent. It's not a restricted free agent. It's an exclusive rights free agent. The Lions had, I believe, 16 of these players. I believe it was 16, and 13 of them, as of now, have been tendered by the Detroit Lions. Now, what is an exclusive rights free agent, you may ask? We've talked about them a little bit. Basically, it's a really cheap contract for the next season. Exclusive rights free agent is a player with 2 or fewer accrued seasons in the NFL. However, they're on an expiring contract. These players, the team can decide to tender them. So let's say I have an exclusive rights free agent coming up for the next season, and I want to put a tender on that player. That player, no negotiation, will be back with that team for the next season. Now, you don't have to keep him. You can still cut him and things like that, but he'll be back under contract for the next season. However, these are very cheap contracts. From my understanding, they range from about $705K to $895K, and there's no guarantees on this contract. So basically, it kind of gets you back in the door with the team for the next season, have an opportunity to compete for a starting role, not for a starting role, but to compete for a spot on that team, to get to see you for the summer workouts, things like that. Sometimes you get a bargain just because of how it works out when you get a player that was a starter and you bring him back on a ridiculously cheap deal. And the Lions look like they have done that with a few players this year. But basically, it kind of gives a lot of guys an in to that roster for the next season. It gives them an opportunity to show what they can do. And if the team does decide they don't want to keep them around for the next season, they can cut them, and there is no guaranteed money there. But the Detroit Lions have done this with 13 exclusive rights free agents. So we're going to go through the 13 players. Who are they, and who are the Lions bringing back under contract for the next season? Let's just dive into it. We got a lot of them to talk about, so let's get right into it. Let's start off with the first one, the easy one. It's long snapper Scott Daly, who has taken over for Don Muhlbach. Scott Daly, going into now his second season with the Detroit Lions, took over for Don Muhlbach. It was a kind of a big surprise. You know, it was happening, I think, during training camp time, and the Detroit Lions decided to cut Don Muhlbach. It was on his birthday, and it was like, oh, that's messed up. But now we see that he is working with the Detroit Lions staff. We saw him at the Senior Bowl, so that's all good. Everything's good there. But now Scott Daly is our long snapper going forward, and he will be back for next season. So that's an easy one. The next one, again, pretty much an easy one here, is Jack Fox. This is arguably the biggest bargain that we've gotten out of all these guys, because Jack Fox, for the second straight year, is an exclusive rights tender for the Detroit Lions. This is our punter. One of the better punters in the National Football League. Now, last season, I wouldn't say was as good as his 2020 breakout year, was like, whoa, hold up. Who is this dude? He looks great. Remember, he took over for Sam Martin, and then he just went crazy. And last year, according to Pro Football Focus, he was ranked as the #1 punter in the National Football League. This year, they ranked him as number 19, but he was still a very good punter for the Lions. His averages were very similar. He had 17 punts within the opponent's 20-yard line. It was a little bit of a drop off from the 2020 season. We saw a couple of, misfires last year. We saw a few of those. The one, I think his shoe came off. But for the most part, it still was a pretty darn good season for Jack Fox. We know he has a booming leg, and when he gets a hold of it, it's gone. Plus, you love the fact that he can also fake a punt. I mean, he was 2 for 3 last year, picked up 2 conversions for us. And when you're aggressive like Dan Campbell, to have a quarterback that can, stand back there and make an accurate pass, hey, we can work with that. We can work with that. So Jack Fox is also back for next season, and you got to believe he's going to be the starting punter next year. So again, that one looks like a complete bargain for the Detroit Lions. I mean, punters don't get paid a ton, but that works really well for us. The next one. Now, this one kind of surprised me a little bit, to be honest. I didn't know if he'd be on this list, but it is cornerback Mark Gilbert, and I absolutely love this. So the former Duke cornerback that had a very hot start to his college career, but it kind of got derailed big time. He was with the Pittsburgh Steelers coming into the season. We saw him in the preseason. the Detroit Lions played against Mark Gilbert in that preseason game. And what was funny is the way that it worked out is his first game with the Detroit Lions last year was against the Pittsburgh Steelers when Jerry Jacobs later in that game went down with an injury. You could kind of tell it was his first game and he was kind of thrown in there on the fly because it looked like there were some communication issues here and there. But Mark Gilbert also flashed some big-time promise. On 8 targets, he was accounted for allowing 3 completions, which was a 56.2 passer rating. And he also had the extremely clutch forced fumble, the big reception that he gave up in that game, which looked like he was going to set the Pittsburgh Steelers up for a game-winning field goal. He forced the fumble and gave it back to our offense. It was an ugly game. It was back and forth, but we did get to see some promise. And I thought Mark Gilbert looked pretty good in that game. So they're bringing back Mark Gilbert for another opportunity. I like it. This is someone that in my mock off season I brought him back. So I like Mark Gilbert. I would love to give him another shot. All these guys are young players because they haven't been in the league that long. So let me just throw that out there. I love the fact though that we're bringing back Mark Gilbert for another season to compete at that cornerback position. We got some good young competition there. We know guys like Bobby Price are also in this group. You also have a possible Will Harris who could be just kind of a full-time cornerback. Mark Gilbert to me showed some comfortability in some of the cover 3 tasks they were putting him in. He also did pretty well covering some of the go routes that he was matched up against, but we know the field conditions weren't great that day anyway. And you can't help but notice the kind of energy that Aaron Glenn and Aubrey Pleasant had towards Mark Gilbert after this play, allowing a couple extra yards. But in the words of Ben Johnson, the red flag should go up when they stop coaching you. That's what he said at the Senior Bowl, Lions Den video. By the way, I have a reaction for that. He also has kind of a small build, pretty light frame. He's only 175 pounds. Maybe he can continue to build on that with another season with the Detroit Lions since he was picked up midway through last season. But I do like the fact that Mark Gilbert is back for possibly another season. Next up, we have another defensive back, but this is a safety. This is Juju Hughes from the LA Rams. Now, if this name does not sound familiar, that's because we didn't get to see him at all last season. Juju Hughes was a pickup after the season through waivers from the LA Rams. Now, he's kind of an undersized safety coming out of college, 5'11", 188 pounds. But I think first off, just for depth purposes alone here, this one makes sense. I mean, the Lions don't have a ton of safeties under contract. We know Tracy Walker is not under contract. I believe he'll come back, but we'll see what happens there. He's not under contract. You basically have guys like Brady Breeze, Will Harris, depending on if they want to keep him at that safety position. It's just not very deep in terms of depth. And there's another exclusive rights free agent, which we'll get to, that the Lions decided not to bring back. They also have restricted free agent CJ Moore. It's just pretty light there right now. So that makes sense. Plus, if you're going to pick up the guy after the season, you got to believe that they're going to sign the guy back. And since it's exclusive rights free agent, it's very cheap. So you got to believe the guy's going to come back, because why pick him up at that point if you're not going to bring him back? Next up, we have an offensive player that we did get to see last year. This is Godwin Iguibuike. I think I kind of killed that actually. Hold up. Godwin, the transition from safety to running back is what we saw last season. And he definitely saw some of the speed that the Lions were excited about and why Anthony Lynn kind of spotted this. A guy that had 18 carries last season. He made some plays in the preseason and carried over to the regular season at 18 carries for 118 yards. That's 6.6 yards per carry, the highest yards per carry amount for any running back that we had last season. He actually kind of drives up our yards per carry statistics a little bit because of that. However, the big issue with Godwin is that he had 2 fumbles, and there was a part there with Godwin where you were lacking some trust in the confidence of him holding on to the football, and it almost could have been a huge game changer against the Arizona Cardinals when he fumbled, because it felt like, oh gosh, the momentum's going to change. But luckily Amani got the pick, ran it back, and we scored a touchdown. There's also the special teams factor, and I believe he was our best kick returner last year, as if you take a look at the kick returners on average, they had at least 10 returns. He was 9th in the National Football League with just under his 24.9 yards per kick return. And some of those guys only had like 10. So statistically on special teams, he was pretty good as well. But actually, this has grown on me a little bit, because originally I was like, nah, I don't really want Godwin back. But when you do think about the fact that he's only been playing running back for 1 season, the speed, 6.6 yards per carry, I mean, the guy definitely flashed. It's just about being able to trust him to hold on to the football. Deuce Staley kind of excels in this department with a full offseason. I do like the idea of bringing him back for at least competition. Plus, it seemed like the Lions liked him on passing downs more than a guy like Jamar Jefferson. When they went to passing downs, wasn't Jefferson that was on the field. It was Godwin that was on the field, and he had 6 receptions last year. We know he's got a ton of speed. I actually kind of like the idea of bringing him back, because there are no guarantees on this deal, but I like the idea of bringing him back to have an opportunity to compete once again. Another offseason of now just working as a running back, I think should be very beneficial. But the biggest thing is he has to take care of the football. Absolutely has to. Next up, we have another offensive player. This is wide receiver Tom Kennedy. He was with the Lions all last season. Through the preseason, he was the guy that shined in the receiver room, especially when David Blau was in the game. He was kind of with that group, and they shined together. roster, and to Tom Kennedy a roster spot. I mean, we had guys like Rashad Perriman who were really struggling. We didn't really get to see him much. So they gave this spot to Tom Kennedy as our final basically receiver on the 53-man roster, on the original 53-man roster. Now, we didn't see him much last season, as statistically only 10 targets and 7 receptions. A lot of times I thought when he came in games, it was like, okay, we're going to a run play here. So the Lions like the guy's toughness. We know that. We saw him in the preseason flash. Definitely, 5'10", 185 pounds. He's not really an outside threat, I don't believe. I mean, Dan Campbell said when we brought him back, he believes he could help us there. Don't think really there's too much upside to that. I know he can attack the middle a little bit as well. But Tom Kennedy, we definitely know the guy has some speed. He's also helped us a little bit on special teams, which was a concern with Tom Kennedy, was can he have any kind of role on special teams if he's not the return man? That was a huge concern when we were talking about him trying to be the final receiver on the roster. However, we did see him a little bit on special teams last year, trying to find a role for the guy. So Tom Kennedy is back. Definitely don't think there's any lock whatsoever here for him to make the roster, but we know the Lions liked him last season. I'm sure they're going to bring in way more competition this offseason, but they did like the way that he played, the style he played with, and if they can find some sort of role consistently for him on special teams, it will definitely increase his chances of actually making the team again next season. But if anything, it feels like, I feel like his ceiling's probably practice squad for the Lions, but you never know. They liked him a lot last year. Continuing with the offensive players, now we're going to go into the trenches. We have an offensive guard. This is Tommy Kramer, who was basically a rookie last season out of Notre Dame. So we bring in Tommy Kramer, and I thought the first time we saw him, he struggled a little bit, but I always say this, I thought he improved game after game after game. He also proved he could play both guard positions, which I thought was huge. Logan Stenberg, we didn't get to see him the whole time. There was an injury in there. Tommy Kramer basically became the backup offensive guard, and what was cool about that is no matter which guard was out, he kind of plugged in and played that spot, whether it was right guard or left guard. When we missed Big V, he would just slide in right to that spot. And I thought he improved as the season went along. So Tommy Kramer at his age, I think it makes a ton of sense to bring him back, and I wouldn't be shocked if he comes in next year on the Lions' final roster as our backup guard. I actually would have no issue with that whatsoever. Sure, there will be brought competition, and somehow maybe it's another UDFA, but I definitely like me some Tommy Kramer, and I thought this was one of the no-brainers that the Lions had to make to bring one of these guys back. He was accounted for 3 penalties last season, but he did allow 0 sacks, according to Pro Football Focus. But I do like having Tommy Kramer back on the roster, and I could absolutely see him on the final roster next year. I don't know about a starter, but who knows? I mean, I thought he improved a lot, so who knows with another season what he could become with the Lions. Next up, back to the defense side of the ball, we're talking about Jesse Lemonier. Jesse Lemonier, the outside linebacker. We picked him up from the LA Chargers. You definitely saw some pass rush there when you watched his preseason film. And the Detroit Lions picked him up. We needed some depth at the outside linebacker position. And I thought, again, he kind of came along as the season went on. He had his first, full sack against the Green Bay Packers. He finished the season with 1.5 sacks, 15 combined tackles, and 6 pressures. We saw him kind of come along a little bit. This was one that I was wondering what the Lions would do with, but I think it does make sense now, not knowing who you're going to land in the draft, not knowing who you're going to land in free agency. I think it makes sense to have him back for at least depth as of now, and then seeing on how the offseason plays out, where his role will end up. Play a little bit on special teams as well last season. On to the offensive line now. Back to the trenches on the offensive line. We have offensive tackle Matt Nelson. Matt Nelson played a lot for the Lions last year. A lot. And we didn't really have another direction to go. We know Dan Skipper, who was playing well in the preseason, was injured. We didn't really have another direction. I mean, we brought in some guys. We had Darren Paulo in there. We had Will Holden from the Pittsburgh Steelers, which we saw him a little bit play left tackle, and that just wasn't good. Look, Matt Nelson absolutely struggled last season. We know that. He definitely struggled as a pass protector last year, and it was an issue for us, but we did get to see him a lot. And there is a lot of experience there, which is beneficial for him. It was an issue for us. You felt the huge impact. This is a position I've talked about many times. I want the Lions to add at least some competition this offseason, and I believe that they will after hearing Dan Campbell at the Senior Bowl saying that they would like to add depth to the offensive line. Again, I don't think there's any guarantee this guy makes the roster next season. See someone taking his spot. However, where Matt Nelson did thrive was playing that extra offensive lineman role, playing the 6th offensive lineman role. That's where he seemed to find his fit for the Lions, and that was the ability to get to the second level, play as that extra guy. Not necessarily hold up an anchor as his own tackle, but play as the extra offensive lineman. The experience has to be extremely valuable here for Matt Nelson as he was playing the right tackle spot and they had moved Penei Sewell to the left tackle spot. But I definitely, again, would not say this is a lock that he's brought back next season. It is a spot the Lions need to look to try to improve at. And again, if he beats out his competition, then cool. I mean, go for it. But there needs to be better competition there this offseason. That's all I'll say about that, because last year with injuries and stuff, it just was not there, and we just need to come in with a better plan. Back to the special teams, we have Riley Patterson. Probably seems like a no-brainer. Now, we do have the other kicker on the roster. Austin Seibert under contract already for next season. But the Lions came into last year with no kickers. They cut both of their kickers, all right, for roster spots. They came in with none. Then they brought in Austin Seibert, and Austin Seibert was kind of our kicker last season, and he did a pretty good job. He was 10 for 12 when he was playing for the Lions. He showed some leg strength also. We saw him taken out, and I believe it was by COVID that we lost Austin Seibert. And once that happened, things got kind of ugly for the Lions. Next up, it was Ryan Santoso, who was fine in the Baltimore game when we needed him then, but it turned out not to be, and he was ended up cut after the Pittsburgh Steelers game. He missed an extra point. He also missed a potential game winner. Well, what would have been the game winner in that game. So we ended up moving on for Ryan Santoso. They added Aldrick Rosas, and then they also brought in Riley Patterson from Memphis. We saw Aldrick Rosas first, who looked fine. Didn't really have many attempts, but we saw him first. He was 1 for 1. Then the next week, the Lions went with Riley Patterson, and from there on, the Lions never looked back. They continued with Riley Patterson, a young player. I mean, he was picked up from the New England Patriots. He was on basically his rookie season out of Memphis. He was good for the Lions last season. He only missed one kick. He was 13 of 14, 16 of 16 on extra points. The only miss that he had was his 50-plus yard kick. It definitely makes you a little bit concerned about what his leg strength is because it didn't seem that close. But he did make a 49-yard field goal against the Minnesota Vikings, which was like, okay, he does have a little bit of length there. So there will be another offseason compete. At very least, the Lions will have competition between Austin Seibert and Riley Patterson. And I'm here for it. I'm all the way here for it. And I hope that the Lions don't come into next season without a kicker. I mean, it's fine because it worked out, based on the roster thing. It was like, hey, this works out better. I think it's a pretty fine battle. Next up, we have a cornerback. This is Bobby Price. Now, a former safety moving to the cornerback position. We saw that transition in the preseason. He had a lot of tackles in one of his preseason games. However, for Bobby Price, when it came to the regular season, that's where the issues really started to show. First off, for the Lions, it was Jeff Okudah who went down, and then if he went down, and we know he missed a lot of the season. So at that point, the Lions were already to Bobby Price. They were already in the depth of the cornerback position. So they went with Bobby Price, and it just didn't go so well. Now, statistically, it was accounted for only allowing 8 completions on 18 targets, but if you watched it, it was an issue. I'm in the Green Bay Packers game, which is the game that if he went down and he was injured on the deep shot to Devontae Adams, but he got his revenge. He got his revenge with the pass breakup in the final week of the season. That was a nice little, way to circle back around to that. But then we bring in Bobby Price, and he was struggling in that first game against the Green Bay Packers. Aaron Rodgers, he's going to attack you as soon as you come in. So then we bring in Jerry Jacobs for one play, and the first play he comes in, he gets called for pass interference, so they go right back to Bobby Price. They were struggling to find answers. The very next week, they head to Baltimore with Bobby Price. Now, they definitely probably left some points on the board with some drop passes. Again, it was not perfect here either. On to Chicago, and I think Chicago was kind of the last straw because it was rough. He had 5 tackles in that game, but he was just getting attacked constantly, and you could just see it. I think that game he gave up over 100 yards receiving. It was very, very rough, and that led you to Minnesota, which is the first game we got to see Jerry Jacobs as a starter for the Detroit Lions. And I guess the good thing out of all this is we got to see Jerry Jacobs, and Jerry Jacobs turned into a really darn good cornerback, and he never looked back until, of course, he got injured, but he played really solid against Minnesota, and we went on from there. But the Lions like the appeal of Bobby Price, especially at the cornerback position, because first off, he's 6'3", he's long, he's a big cornerback, he's over 200 pounds, and he's fast. It's those physical guys that can fly that the Lions like, especially at the cornerback position. So that transition, you knew it was going to take time. It's not easy to just be like, hey, I'm a safety, but now I'm cornerback. Like, that's tough. It's not easy. It's probably fine on Madden, but real life, it's not an easy thing to do. And we saw that firsthand. For a guy like Jerry Jacobs who's been doing it, for his entire life, it was a much more smooth transition. We got to see, okay, Jerry Jacobs, he looks good. But now bringing back Bobby Price, a guy that I thought was doing really well on special teams. From what I can remember, I thought he was doing well on special teams, playing like a gunner role. I thought he did well there. I thought it was a much better role for him. But now another season developed, now being, again, kind of like Godwin. Okay, I'm a cornerback. I need to clean some things up here. They like my build. They like my physicality. They like my size. They like my speed. I got to improve. And he is back for another season potentially with the Lions. Well, he's under contract for another season. And then we have tight end Brock Wright. Now, this was basically the backup tight end to TJ Hawkinson last season. We were struggling to figure out who that was going to be because you come into the year thinking it's Josh Hill from the Saints. Then all of a sudden he retires. So they bring in a big man, the former basketball player that was with the Detroit Lions, Darren Fells. And that doesn't work. The Detroit Lions end up cutting Darren Fells. And now you're trying to search for who's that next tight end. And ultimately, Brock Price won that role, and I thought he won it pretty convincingly. Guy had 12 receptions last season on 70 targets, 2 touchdowns. He was accounted for 1 drop, which I remember he was like trying to catch like one-handed, and he kind of like fell down. It was kind of ugly, but the guy will block. He's physical, can play as an inline tight end. He's more of that kind of tight end. But we've also saw him kind of come around as a pass catcher. We saw the touchdown against Minnesota, which was really pretty, like a one-armed. Brock Wright is a guy that I was like, you got to bring this dude back, okay? Even if he's not your number 2 next year, you got to remember that this dude is only 23 years old. He's only 23 years old. And the Lions were trying to bring in competition. They brought in the dude from Ohio State. Multiple times like that. They had Jared Pinkney in there at a time. We also had Shane Zylstra from Minnesota. But this guy with his ability to block in line, I thought was huge. He even stepped up and became our one tight end when T.J. Hockenson was down. And no, he wasn't the same pass-catching threat, the same receiving threat. And I think the Lions could use more of competition of a guy that's more of a receiving threat, because Shane Zylstra looked like he was going to be that because he was so much of a big blocking tight end. Zylstra really didn't make a big impact with us. So Brock Wright, to me, he won the 2 tight end job last year. And I would not be shocked if he wins it again next year, to be honest. He's only 23 years old. Again, another offseason with this team. Still very young. Can block. And I thought he improved big time as the year went on. Brock Wright, super excited to have this dude back. And finally, we have Anthony Pittman, the linebacker, a guy that we got to see in the preseason a little bit as well, make some plays. The Lions spoke highly of a lot of these guys. 76 snaps for the Detroit Lions defensively, which wasn't a ton. He did have 18 combined tackles on the season as he played on some special teams as well. Anthony Pittman is brought back. And again, linebacker is another one of those positions where we're kind of light, whether it's Devontae Beckett, Curtis Bolton, Derek Barnes, Josh Woods. That's it. That's all we have at this spot. So more competition with a guy like Anthony Pittman to bring back. No lock to make the team whatsoever. Could be a practice squad player. We'll see. But we just are really light at this position as well. And then there was 3 players that the Lions did not tender that are exclusive rights free agents. Again, they could have brought them back very cheap. Could they still do it? Yeah, maybe. But it is something to make note of as of now, at least. Those 3 players are, first off, center Ryan Mccollum. Now, Ryan Mccollum was kind of our 3rd center last year, and we had to bring him in when Frank Ragnow went down. We had Evan Brown, and we had, Frank Ragnow. But then, once Frank Ragnow went down, it was Evan Brown, so we needed backup for him, which was Ryan Mccollum, who we saw a little bit last year, but the struggle was definitely real, to the point where the Detroit Lions ended up in that Green Bay Packers game, putting Jonah Jackson at center. That's not really a vote of confidence when you put your guard at center. It was like, oh, this is not good. And maybe that's part of the reason that this has happened. Definitely felt the difference. He felt the impact. Now, Evan Brown was really good last season, and we've talked about this in the restricted free agent video. He could be looking for a starting job next year, at least competing for it, and he probably won't get that here. So who knows if he can be brought back. Hopefully this means that the Lions are making a push to bring Evan Brown back. I would love to have Evan Brown back. I hope we can get him back. Don't know, though. It's not going to be easy. Frank Ragnow, of course, under contract, highest paid center in the league per year on average. I mean, they could have brought him back again to try to improve next season, but when you move your guard to the center spot, it's like, okay, that's probably not a good sign. And you felt it when he was out there. There was a lot of pressure from the interior. So Ryan Mccollum is one of the guys as of now the Detroit Lions have not put a tender on. Also, you have safety Jaylen Elliott. This one's a little bit surprising. We saw him a little bit last season as well. Again, this is a spot where we're kind of light, but we brought back Juju Hughes. So maybe that's, kind of the spot he's taking. Also, like I said, CJ Moore is a restricted free agent. I would actually prefer bringing back CJ Moore over Jaylen Elliott after the film that I've watched on the 2. So there's that as well. And we all know Lions are going to add competition to this, whether that's draft, free agency, or both. And you have Tracy Walker, who I really hope and I think will be back this offseason. I still believe he will. But Jaylen Elliott's one of them. And then finally, you have Rashad Berry from the New England Patriots, the edge rusher. Now, Rashad Berry also played tight end back in college, but he was an edge for the Patriots. That's what he utilized him here as. I thought he might utilize him as a tight end, but we utilized him as an edge rusher. However, bringing back Jesse Lemonnier, and that's part of the reason they decided to go with him over Rashad Berry. I completely understand the decision. I would have probably made the same decision as well if those two were two I was debating between. So Rashad Berry is another guy the Lions did not tender. So 13 free agents, exclusive rights free agents, have been tendered next season. And all these guys are under contract for next year. Does not mean they'll make the team. They're not very expensive, and there's no guarantees. So they could easily be cut. But it gives you an opportunity to show yourself in the summer, give another opportunity so the coaches can see you again, get a chance to compete. So we got some bargains out of it once again with our punter. Jack Fox. And at some point, we're probably going to have to pay this dude. We will take it. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Any surprises here? I really wouldn't say there's any big surprises. Matt Nelson one isn't a surprise to me. We just needed more competition for it. Godwin, I started to grow on me a little bit. I love the fact they brought back Mark Gilbert. I was super pumped about that. Juju makes sense because, why would you claim the guy and then not bring him in for next year? That wouldn't make any sense. Like, why even claim the guy? So really not a lot of big surprises here. I thought Brock Wright was an absolute no-brainer. Bobby Price is interesting. They had a lot of confidence in him early, but clearly it was not working. So now you have Bobby Price and Mark Gilbert. Definitely want to keep that competition in the cornerback room. It's kind of deep on paper. I mean, who you have under contract next year, you got like 7 if you include Will Harris. Technically, you have 8 guys under contract at corner for next season. Still doesn't mean they won't add to it, but it's something to know. 8 cornerbacks are under contract next year for the Lions. I'm just throwing it out there, but we know these defensive backs coaches like their guys. I like a lot of these guys too. I thought Mark Gilbert had to come back, and we know they like Bobby Price's upside. Maybe he goes back safety. I doubt it, though. You told him he's going to be a corner. I think you continue to work with that. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you, Prop, for watching, and I'm out.